Are you an HR department of one, trying to figure out how to balance task and strategy while keeping up with changes in regulatory compliance? Do you need a fresh outlook on old topics? Then stop what you're doing, grab your coffee, and get ready to recharge. If you have people, you have problems to solve and things to do. Your host is Brenda and Dr, a 20-year human resource professional, ready to explore the HR industry with veterans of business and life with fresh eyes and new ideas. Learn about the rapidly evolving changes in employment law around the country, as well as new tactics to deploy and build engagement in your workforce. If you're looking to implement new practices to make your job easier in HR, then this podcast is for you.
Hello and welcome to the Best Practices in Human Resources podcast. I am Brenda, the HR lady, and I'd like to thank you for listening to the show. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for returning for yet another episode. You guys come back week after week, and I really, really greatly appreciate it. You absolutely rock. And if you are a first-time listener, well, welcome. I'm here to help share with you the what and the how in human resources because I'm in the human business, and that means that there's a greater number of dynamics in the workplace to balance and manage. So today, I'm going to share with you employment law changes that are happening across the nation, and I'm going to share with you how you can find access and links to these articles that I call out. Our main topic today, we're going to be talking about assessing the assessments with a very awesome guest. His name is Dr. Shuster, and I'm going to share with you later on how you can get my best practices delivered directly to your inbox. And before we go on, folks, the information that is available through this podcast is, in fact, for informational purposes only, and not for the purpose of providing any form of legal advice. You should contact your attorney to obtain legal advice with respect to any particular issue, and if you do not have an employment attorney, you may go ahead and reach out to me, and I would be happy to possibly see what I could do to refer one to you through our affiliates program and our friends over at Jackson Lewis. All right, so first article we got today, another good one, titled, Will COVID-19, quote-unquote, long haulers be next to test the limits of the American with Disabilities Act? Next articles, we're talking about a pandemic necessities review of donning and doffing policies. And if you don't know what donning and doffing means, that means if you have employees that work in an environment where they have to don equipment, they have to put it on, that's deemed as compensable, which means that they get paid for it. Doffing is just the opposite, means that it comes off. So definitely some good information on there. Next article we've got is a deferred compensation plans. It talks about different options and considerations. And the EEOC has also proposed conciliation procedure rules as well. So more progress coming out of the EEOC. Over in California, the California Department of Justice has announced a third set of modifications to the CCPA regulations. Also, New California paid data collection law has established March 31st as the reporting deadline. California legislature also essentially eliminates public works de minimis expectations. And California has actually made some updates to their restrictions on using criminal records as a means of making employment decisions. Over in Illinois, there is a new template out about respiratory protection program that is available from a law firm. Over in Michigan, the latest COVID-19 developments, what employers need to know. Up in New York and New Jersey, they have released COVID-19 exposure apps. And over in Oregon, the Bureau of Labor and Industries has issued temporary rules under the Oregon Family Leave Act for school or child care provider closures. Up in Pennsylvania, a couple of important call-outs. A federal court finds Pennsylvania's Medical Marijuana Act that contains implied private rights of action. And Pennsylvania's new overtime salary threshold has taken effect. So if you're in Pennsylvania, you're definitely going to want to learn about that. And lastly, up in Wisconsin, there is now a new separation notice that is required for Wisconsin employers. And that is what we've got going on across the nation.
There are approximately 2,500 members of the U.S. Special Operations Community who transition out of active duty military service every single year. The Honor Foundation's dedicated its mission to serving these elite individuals on their journey to prepare for life once they take off the uniform. In the past few years, we've begun our own journey to reach this number, launching 3 physical campuses in San Diego, California, Virginia Beach, Virginia, and near Wilmington, North Carolina, along with a virtual campus to reach members of the community anywhere on the planet. I spent 26 years in the Special Operations community as a SEAL. I graduated from THF's program, I served on the board of directors, and now I'm proud to lead this organization into the future to continue assisting these transitioning service members and their families. Our dedicated team, our world-class program, and our incredible tribes of supporters are standing by to help THF alumni and future fellows, and are committed to providing the best possible support system and resources to better serve this community. Our vision for the Honor Foundation is clear: to impact every transitioning service member from the U.S. Special Operations Enterprise through our programs and support, and to be a catalyst for overhauling the entire DoD transition program. It's a big task, but the community deserves it, and we're driving full steam ahead to make this a reality. If you've been inspired with what the Honor Foundation's done in the last 5 years, I welcome you all to join us as we craft the next chapter in defining what it means to serve others with honor for life.
Our guest today is an awesome conversationalist. I cannot wait. We were talking before this, and I'm like, oh my God, I wish we were recording this right now. Just a phenomenal human being. His name is Dr. Richard Shuster, and he goes by Dr. Richard. And we're going to talk about something pretty important today, and that is assessing the assessment. So how are you? Welcome. I'm glad you're here.
I'm doing awesome. I'm glad I'm here too. So we're going to have some fun today. And we were talking about dogs, and we were talking about all kinds of cool stuff before we hit the red light here. So we're going to have a good time and hopefully provide some real value.
Oh, love it. They're very excited about that. But you have a very interesting story. So before we get into the whole assessing the assessment things, you have a very interesting backstory, and you are prime reason why I preach to people that you have to take care of yourself first before you're able to take care of anything else. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but would you please share with everybody listening your backstory and why you are now focused on taking care of yourself first before you focus on taking care of everything else?
Absolutely. And thank you, Brenda, for the opportunity to share that story, because I think it's one that everybody needs to hear. You know, I have had, a previous brush with death, 20 years ago when I broke my spine in that car accident, which is what I discuss in my TED Talk. So that's not new. And hopefully I don't have to go through that kind of a thing again. But it was not that long ago that, COVID has impacted businesses in so many ways. And it's actually really propelled mine because of what I do and how I help people and companies. And I was really, several months ago, at the absolute apex of where I wanted to be. I just had my best quarter ever, which I'm grateful for, because I know it is a struggle for a lot of people right now. My TED Talk went live, and my podcast just did its 275th episode, and everything was clicking. And I loved what I did. I was so happy to get up and do my thing. And then I suffered a stroke, which was very unexpected. In fact, for those of you that don't know me, my background is neuropsychology, and even then, it was an impossibility. It was, we were talking about puppies, so we were crate training ours. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I was actually awoken from a dead sleep by this stroke. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I woke up and thrashing in the bed, and I didn't feel a pop like some people experience, but I just felt very hot, very anxious, never experienced anything like this. And I instinctively ripped the pillow out from under my wife's head, who immediately sat up and rocked an expletive my way, because she loves sleeping. And and what I should have said was, something's wrong, I need help. For whatever reason, the words that came out of my mouth were, "I'm sorry." And she grunted and kind of rolled her eyes and went back to bed. And then I went back to bed. stupidly with a bleeding brain. And it was that puppy who woke me up 3 hours later. So now flash forward to 5:30 in the morning, and the dog is barking, and I'm on puppy patrol. So I get out of bed. This was actually the first time I physically tried to stand up, and I didn't feel right. And I'm thinking, well, I did take an antihistamine at about 11 o'clock and like trying to calculate half-lives. And okay, so that could still be in my system. And I kind of stumbled down the stairs. The dog had left a very brown surprise in the crate, and then had taken the liberty of using his paws to kind of be artistic and get that all over the place, right? And so that's a two-person job for sure. So I go back up the stairs and explain to my wife what has transpired. And she shot up immediately and said, "You're slurring your words." And I said, boy, that Benadryl, man, that really did a number on me. And so we get back downstairs and we get the dog and we get it to the front of the house and we get him on the leash. And so now I'm going to take him out. And I grab my cell phone to get that flashlight because it's pitch black outside. And then I discover I don't know how to use my cell phone at all. And kind of like Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense, like everything popped, all the clues: unsteady, slurred speech, can't use my cell phone. Holy crap, I've had a stroke. And so we rushed to the hospital, and they immediately begin their interrogation of me. And the big joke in graduate school was, pray you never have a traumatic brain injury or a stroke, because you're going to know the answer to every single question they're going to ask you. and in fact, it was the case. They have this little checklist. It's called the mini mental status exam.
What day is it? Yeah,
right. And the guy sits there, "I'm going to ask you 3 words." And I said the 3 words before he even got a chance to ask them. They're like, like they're all looking at each other. And so, they gave me a CT scan, which was negative, and said, "Great job, good luck, or we're going to send you out of here because there's no evidence of a stroke." And I really had to fight for my life and just said, look, and I don't throw the title around. But I said, listen, I studied neuropsychology. I've trained, and seen patients from the Cleveland Clinic. I've seen stroke a lot, and damn well that only a certain kind of stroke, an embolic stroke, will show up on a CT, not an ischemic stroke. I need an MRI, and I need one right now, and you're going to give it to me. And then I remembered this piece of advice that at my first job when I was out of college, the operations manager at the company told me. He said, when you lay down the gauntlet, be it a sales pitch or whatever it is, look him in the eye and don't say anything, because whoever talks first gives in. So I locked in on him, and and I could tell how much tension was in the room, because who talks to doctors that way, right? And so he acquiesced, and he did an MRI, and it showed the stroke. In fact, much like with my car accident when I broke my spine, had I hit that fracture point a little bit higher in my spine, I'd probably be paralyzed from the neck down. Wow. Had it been just a slight bit lower, I would have been paralyzed from the waist down, and obviously, not paralyzed at all, which is wonderful. Had the stroke been about 1 millimeter in the other way, it would have hit my basal ganglia, which is a part of the brain really central for speech and movement. And I would look like a patient with advanced Parkinson's, probably couldn't speak, or would stutter to the degree that communication would likely not be possible in any meaningful way, would probably be in a wheelchair, would probably be shaking, and would lack the capacity to do things like use a fork and knife and everything. So I really dodged a bullet, unbelievably lucky. And as I was recovering and they're trying to figure out what could happen, why did this happen? Because I'm a young guy, relatively speaking, although my kids tell me I'm an old man. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I've never used drugs in my life. I eat right. And I exercised at that point 7 days a week, in some instances twice a day. So they didn't know what to do with me. And they said, well, maybe it's cancer. So they sent me to go in an oncologist. I didn't have cancer. Oh, maybe it's just thyroid. And they sent me to this person. Not my thyroid. What it was at the end of the day.
Here it comes. Here comes the big reason.
Was working too hard and literally almost worked myself to death. And the certainly if you're an entrepreneur, this is true, but even in jobs we love, we beat our chests and we say, well, it's not really work if you love what you do. So
No, of course it is.
right. You cannot burn the candle at both ends.
No.
You cannot burn the candle at both ends. There will be a price to it. Now, if you hate your job, I would certainly, that's more stressful than if you like it. But what I didn't share in the beginning of the story is that day for me, which was very typical at the time. My day started at 5 a.m. And I did have an exercise practice and a gratitude routine and all of these things that I would do every day. But I would work until the second my kids walked in the door. And then we'd do dinner and story time and baths. But the second they were back asleep, I was back in front of the laptop. And that night, I worked till almost 10 o'clock at night. And it was not atypical for me to put in 17-hour days.
Yep.
And so, I had to reduce my hours radically.
Right.
Not because I wanted to. I loved what I do, but because my life literally depended on it. And so that has been, the biggest wake-up call. And so I've become very judicious about my time. I only let certain things show up on my radar that are important. I'm saying no to more things than I've ever said no to in my life. And it was kind of like going through withdrawal. Like I was so used to, an email would come in. It didn't matter what time at night it was. I'm like, oh, the great opportunity and blah, blah, blah. And now like that laptop shuts at 4 o'clock every day.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. I don't check my emails after 4 o'clock. I don't care who's calling me. It goes to voicemail and it'll get picked up the next day.
Yep.
So
absolutely. And this is why I preach this. So this is why it's like, you cannot, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anything else. It's as simple as that. And, God forbid if, thankfully you were not in a situation to where, you were incapacitated permanently. And, you're still able to continue on and do what you do and provide for your family and stuff like that. And this is why, for me, that's why I focus in on recovery. And folks, I don't get paid for this at all. I mean, we've had Will on a little while ago from Naked Warrior Recovery. This is the reason why my daily recovery actually starts at 5 p.m. As I'm up at 5 in the morning. I have a puppy that wakes me up 4 a.m. every day to go out. And that's when my day starts. And I don't go back to sleep. I stay up and I do work when, I don't have phone calls coming in, and I focus on, doing the things that I need to do to help you guys out. But at 5 o'clock, somewhere between 5 and 6 is when I take one of two, 10 milligrams of CBD gummies so I can stop thinking. That's the thing. I can't stop thinking. And I get better recuperative sleep as a result of it. And if you sleep and if you eat well, just doing those two things will help you out immensely. And so thank you for sharing your story, because this is a prime example of what happens if you just, go at it so hard that there were no warning signs. It just happened.
Yeah, it was like the blink of an eye. And in the hospital, there were a lot of thoughts that were scary to me, because when you break your arm, for example, Brenda goes skiing this weekend and breaks her arm. You can pretty much determine in about 3 seconds how you're impacted, how you're going to work around that, and over what period of time it's going to be until things get back to normal.
Right.
But as I'm lying there in the hospital, knowing the results of my MRI, tears are streaming down my face because I have no idea if I'm able, because at the time my speech was slurred to the point where my phone wouldn't recognize me for voice dictation. I couldn't really text because in my mind, I did figure out eventually, thumbprint, get me into the phone. But I'm trying to text people because it's COVID, right? So nobody, my wife isn't allowed in the hospital with me. She's sitting at home and nobody knows anything. And it took me like 3 minutes to create a text that just said stroke, because I knew what I wanted to type, but my thumbs would get nowhere near where I wanted. And I had a huge facial droop on the left side of my face. So I'm sitting there in the hospital. a lot of unknowns. I don't know
Yeah.
to what degree I'm going to be able to speak again. And that means my podcast career is over. That means my keynote speaking career is over. Any consulting work, that's over. I don't know to what degree I have memory impairment. Am I even going to be able to drive again? Like the shoe hadn't fallen for me yet. And unfortunately, none of those were issues. And I recovered really a lot faster than anybody thought I would. I kind of enjoy, I take kind of a morbid pleasure out of proving doctors wrong. And I was symptom free in about 2 weeks, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
But
normally that's a long road to hoe.
Yeah, for sure. And, visualization and mindset have a lot to do with that. But I got lucky. I'm unbelievably lucky. Like I said, a millimeter, a fingernail's length is the difference between me being here or me being a burden for my family. And so, I will never put my family in that position again. And for all of you listening, I hope you do take that to heart, because there are simple shifts and changes that we can make to be able to get more out of our time and be able to have more balance.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Now that has nothing to do with what our topic is today,
nothing at all.
It's such a great story. And, when we first started talking a while ago and you mentioned to me that you had a stroke, I'm like, what? And, it's incredible. And so, yes, folks, I mean, this is a prime example of, and I'm not saying everybody's going to go off and have a stroke, but what I'm saying is that, look, life shows up in ways that are adverse. And if you're not taking care of yourself and being predictable for yourself and nurturing, your every step possible forward, it just means that you've got a better chance of handling the things that show up unexpected, because that's just what life does. And yes, you're absolutely right. We can love our jobs. And, there's a lot of good stress that comes out of loving what we do. We get energy, but you know what? If you were to statistically look at the same levels of energy that we're putting out from both stress, positive stress, negative stress, they're the same, because it's energy output. And so that's basically what you're dealing with. And it tears your body down. You dehydrate at night. You dehydrate during the day. If you're not drinking your water, your body's going to, respond to that adversely. So that's why it's so important to take care of yourselves. And that's why I had chosen on the recovery side of the day, because recovering at the end of the day for me is what gives me all of the energy that I need moving forward tomorrow. And it allows me to sleep. And, I'm knocking on the door of 50. I'm not happy about that, but I am. And those things, there's changes that come with that. And, I'm handling it a lot better than what I did at the beginning of the year since I started focusing in on it. So thank you for that. Okay. So today we're talking about assessing the assessments. And one of the things that Dr. Richard does is in his line of work is he has put together assessments, and we're going to talk a little bit about those, but it's one of the things that I want to kick this conversation off with is why we are taking a critical look at assessments. Now, I almost created a second stroke for Dr. Richard when I mentioned, you can laugh, you can unmute yourself because he's over here laughing. When I mentioned, just in passing, it'll go unnamed, but there was an assessment, a very commonly known assessment that I put out there, and he goes, I'll let him explain why. But it's a good assessment. It's an assessment that a lot of people use. It's almost a household name. The technology for this and the research of this goes back to, the 1920s. So when we're looking at assessments and we're talking about why it's important for validation. We've got all these assessments, DISC, and we've got Myers-Briggs, we've got success factors. What is it? I did it again. Success what?
Mine is called Powers.
No, not yours. I'm talking about the book. Oh my gosh, we just said it.
We have to do some serious editing here.
Nah, it's easy editing. So it says success factors.
Strengths?
Strength finders. Oh my gosh.
Finders.
Strength finders. So you've got strength finders.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people tend to want to use these in the interviewing process.
Yeah.
They're not validated. And so it gives this bad juju that follows along with it because they're not validated. So they're very subjective. Yours, on the other hand, I would love for you to share with us what it is that your assessments and why validation is so critical.
Well, I want to say a couple of things first. Number one, as an organization, you really need to know why you're using assessments, and it shouldn't be because you got flown to some HR conference and everybody's doing it too, right?
Right.
There are valid reasons why people should be using assessments, and I don't. Also, one, because I don't want the DISC people to come sue me or steal my dog or anything like that.
We're not saying
Right.
anything bad
No,
about this.
right.
That's not what we're doing.
Right.
We're talking about validation.
So
Totally
there are tools out there that are widely used, and I won't say them by name, that lack empirical validation. Why is that important? Number one, validation lets you know that this is a scientifically accurate tool and not what Game of Thrones character am I Facebook kind of a quiz, right? So that's important. Number two, why does validity matter? So if you have a particular goal, and let's even pull it out of the workspace, and let's say that goal is related to diet and exercise, and you get on your scale, and the scale is actually showing that you're 20 pounds lighter than you really are, and you're out there celebrating victories, and you're going to go celebrate by eating a slab of ribs and half a quart of ice cream. You were making those decisions as to how to proceed in a certain direction based on false information. Right. So it's critical to know that what you're using from a scientific standpoint has gone through the rigors of being tested to make sure that what the questions asked are actually doing what they're doing. And just to throw in some nerdy psychological terms, we call that construct validity. There's all these things that have to be done. Some of the tools do that, although haven't updated their research perhaps in years, if not decades. Mm-hmm. Some of the tools kind of skirt around that issue and don't do it at all and have never done it and are still making a lot of money because they've been very good at marketing and people know who they are. And so you just have to be careful about why you're using an instrument and ask what rigors have you gone through to validate your tools? Right. What's your sample size look like? What does that pool of data look like? Are you including, is it all white people from Minnesota? And I say that because there's a psychological tool that many have heard of called the MMPI. Yep. Which was one of the most well-known personality inventories, still is. They've revised it several times, but that sample size was literally a bunch of lutefisk eating, no disrespect to Minnesotans if they're listening to this, but it was not a representative sample of the country, and certainly not globally, and we are a global workforce today. And so, all of those things matter. And when we created our tools, that was something that we took into consideration. Of course, we worked with a company called Prolific out of England to help us validate this tool. And Prolific they're used by University of Oxford, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, the World Bank, Duke. I mean, it's a pretty heavy hitters use these guys. And so we knew that, what we were doing was going to have the threshold of meeting a standard in terms of scientific expertise and rigor that we could say that our tools do what they say they're going to do.
Right. So I'm going to interject here real quick. So I'm going to give a really good example as to why validity is so critical when it comes to using assessments in HR. So I'm going to use DISC. I love DISC. I absolutely love the company, love the assessment, right? But here's the thing. I've taken this assessment many times. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And depending upon the position that I'm in, depends upon my results. Now, some DISC coaches will argue against that, but I can actually say from my own personal experience, when I was in a capacity of an administrator, not HR administration, I'm talking about baseline administration. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. I'm doing this. These are my daily tasks. I know what I'm doing. I'm not making matters of decisions of importance. I'm at a much different result. I'm at that S, I'm standard, I'm high S, right? That means that my work and my mindset and my communication, because that's what DISC is. It's about how you communicate. It's in that realm. It's in what that definition is. However, if I'm in my HR position, like I am today, right, when I'm consulting, I'm an influencer. I'm a high I or I'm a high D. And usually those two are right next to each other. Guess where my S is? Right down at the very bottom, because I'm not of that communication mode, right? So just looking at my example, because I can speak for myself, when I'm in a leadership capacity, my high D is going to come out. But if I'm in having to negotiate behaviors with people and, needing to get buy-in to the CEO, my high I will show more than my D, because I can't really be dominant in my communication if I'm trying to get somebody to buy into things, unless it's just kind of like I'm in my, okay, this is non-negotiable. Then my high D and my high I work in unison, but that doesn't necessarily reflect that this research is objective enough to be able to stand up, and because it's not validated. And I know that about DISC, and this was, like I said, this is wonderful. But when it comes to that, so if you are making a determination just based off of a 4-letter answer, DISC, and you're hiring or moving somebody through the hiring process, or you're doing something to where you're taking that in consideration with a reduction in force, guess what? You're not using valid information that will substantiate your decisions. And believe it or not, it will come out in court, or it could come out in a litigation. Any employment attorney will tell you, if the assessment is not validated, it actually hurts your position as a company. So
Certainly.
I want to throw that out there.
That's absolutely true. And, I want to bring in another analogy that we talked about off air. And of course, most HR policies in this country are built upon examples taken from the TV series The Office. We know that. We know that to be.
They make them up on their own. Don't worry about that.
Indeed. So I remember an episode distinctly where Michael was driving with Dwight to a sales call with a prospect, and Michael is following the GPS, and the GPS is telling him, go straight. And Dwight is screaming, no, you're driving into a lake. I have to follow the GPS. And so Michael drives into a lake. and so what the dangers with technology are is that we sometimes become overly reliant on them.
Yes.
Wholly reliant on them. And so if you have somebody who takes an assessment tool, whether it's mine or anybody else's, and you have glowing results, but this person interpersonally is not appropriate. An extreme example, obviously, like bloodshot eyes, smells of alcohol, whatever. You have to allow for some degree of human intuition and judgment to go into the decision-making process. Now, that said, a valid tool will allow you to narrow down the pool and say, okay, this may or may not be a fit for a position or our organization, depending on that. But certainly that's a critical thing.
Yeah. And yeah, and it's just, and the other thing that can sometimes happen too is that when people take all these really great assessments throughout their career, then they start to label each other as, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can't talk to Brenda today because she's a high D. No.
Well, we see that as well in instruments that only point out wonderful attributes about people.
Right.
And so if I'm a visionary, right? If you get that, labeled and you walk around the office, I'm a visionary person. And then so when you're in a collaborative setting and they're talking about ideas for, future sales or ways to, do new things, they might be less willing to hear feedback because of that position. And so if you think about it, if everybody just knew what was great about everybody else, we wouldn't need HR and we wouldn't have to have performance reviews because everything is going to be rainbows, Skittles, and unicorns with magic flowing gold coins coming from the sky and all of these things. In fact, it's important to know where an employee excels and where their gifts lie, but it's equally important to know, where are they struggling with? What are the challenges they're facing, and how can we, from an HR standpoint, help address those so they become a more balanced, productive, successful employee?
Right. Yep. I totally agree. So would you please share with them what your assessments are?
Sure. So our flagship in the corporate space is called POWERS. I'm an acronym guy, and POWERS stands for Predictor of World-Class Excellence Rating Scales. And we're on version 2 of this, and we're very proud of that. And what we've done is we've empirically located through the research, or empirically found elements that are critical for success in the workplace. And we built our assessment around that. So we're not only tapping personality, we're not only tapping strengths, but we're looking at aspects of personality, aspects of behavior, talent, leadership potential, work-life balance, to put it all together so that an organization can take a look at their strengths and weaknesses, well-being, and balance of their employees. And we allow you to do this from an organizational, departmental, or even an employee level to increase productivity and retain top talent. And that's especially important. I mean, this came out before the pandemic, but it's especially important now because we certainly know that it's cheaper to identify employees that are struggling and rehabilitate them in those issues than it is for an HR manager to have to terminate somebody, to then have a position unfilled, eventually hire somebody new, and then train that person to get them up to speed. And so, this is a critical thing. And we allow companies to use that data in what we have as it's called our peak performance lab. So what will happen is, once your employees take this, certainly you get individual results, and it's algorithmically driven. So in all of these different dimensions, their interpersonal communication capabilities, their reasoning abilities, where do they fall in terms of inclusivity and diversity, work-life balance, their wellness and strength, their leadership capacity, openness to growth and feedback. All of these have their place, and focusing on just one isn't enough. You could take a personality assessment that will show, this person's personality, they'd be a really good fit for our team. But if you don't have a handle on their level of stress, what degree are especially now where people are teleworking almost exclusively because of this virus, to what degree might stress be impacting their workplace? Are they just barely keeping it together beneath the surface? You don't know. Do they have somebody who's a relative that they've lost, or close person, or you don't know any of those things unless you're looking at strengths and wellness. And so what we then allow you to do is, the algorithm applies all that to specific key things that are important for success in the workplace. How does that affect workplace relations? For example, how does one's communication abilities affect workplace relationships, or teamwork, conflict, self-care, success? So for each dimension we tap, we apply them through a filter through those specific things that I mentioned, those 5 things. And then, as I've said, the cool thing is our peak performance lab, where we literally allow you as an HR manager to go wild with this data and pull up a portal and be able to just, with the click of a mouse, be able to say, okay, I just want to look at sales. I want to look at my sales department and seeing how they look, or I want to look at accounting. I'm going to take a look at these different things. And then you really get to see patterns, because the sales department might be absolutely overwhelmed with stress.
Yep. And
knowing that, you could say, okay, so how can I, from an HR standpoint, address that? And then you address that. And so if you don't have that information, or you're just flying blind, wanting to know how great their personality is, or, let's attaboy pat each other on the back, right? It's not as useful as having a more holistic work, or a holistic view of the workplace.
Yep. Love it. So if people were interested in reaching out to you to talk assessments,
Yep,
and making that introduction, and possibly looking at bringing these tools in, how can they find you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to our website, which is yoursuccessinsights.com. And if you want to take a look at the Powers Corporate in particular, click on Corporate, and it'll drop down to this tool. We actually have a really fun in vivo kind of demo you can take and play with the Peak Performance Data Lab and see what that looks like, not only in terms of looking at things from an organization level. We also have a matrix that helps people put teams together based on our algorithm, which is really cool. And so, I did mention that, this is our flagship tool, but from an EAP standpoint, we also have a new tool coming out for addiction and recovery. And, everything that we've developed, this was kind of my mission and stems off of what I've already done with the podcast, is everything we create has to help people be better than they were. We don't believe that there are any problems that can't be addressed, but we also believe that you can't bury your head in the sand and just focus on one aspect without knowing the whole picture. But certainly your success insights, and if you want to learn more about my other platforms or show, you can find me at drrichardschuster.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for jumping on. This has been fantastic.
I've loved it. We'll have to do this again because this was so much fun for me as well. And hopefully that this added some value for everybody listening, and hope everybody has an outstanding day.
Absolutely. We're going to get you back on when your book is ready.
Right on.
Absolutely. Stress is a killer. It really is. And in this COVID environment, with all the challenges that we've been facing in 2020, you really need to manage your stress, your mindset, and how you feel about what is going on in our world. It is an absolute crazy time. And how you do that is by making some changes in what you put in your body and how you move it. Now, 2 things that I've done for myself is work to improve my sleep and work to improve my eating. It just so happens that as part of that process that I lost 25 pounds using MASF smashing greens. But most importantly, I've kept up my immune system by including dense nutritional support by using these greens. I've also managed my stress by increasing the amount of sleep I get each evening. I use THC-free Naked Warrior Recovery CBD gummies to help me recover from the day. It lowers my stress rate and it helps me achieve 7 hours of good, restful sleep each evening. Love this stuff. If you want more information about it, hit me up. You can go ahead and DM me over on Instagram. You can send me an Insta message over on Facebook. You can reach out to me through LinkedIn, and I'm going to tell you how you guys can do that in a little bit. But if you want to know what's going on, you guys can go ahead, hit me up. I'll get you a code to Naked Warrior Recovery where you can get 20% off on your first order and give these a shot. Absolutely awesome. Now, I don't get, and just so you guys know, I don't get paid for sharing out that information. I just like to share things that I find that works with people who I know are going through something similar. And speaking of which, it is year end. Holy cow, it's creeping up. And if you really don't know what to do with your year end is, it really is one of the busiest times in the year for both HR, payroll, and finance. Okay. And the question is, are you prepared? Do you know what needs to be done? If you don't, go ahead and get the planner that guides you through the year end and helps prepare you on what you need to knock out and to absolutely crush and to have something smooth. So go ahead and visit BrendaTheHRLady.com, click shop at the top, and download a copy of the best HR planner in the world. That's actually what it's called. You'll find it over there. And then there's a lot of really great information in there. The 2021 version is just going to top this one that we put out. And it's getting a lot of really, really positive feedback, positive attention. It gives you 12 months overview of the year. It gives you information about what laws you need to follow based off of the size of your company. And it also gives you an HR checklist plus a lot more that you can access. So go ahead and check that out. Great tool. We love it. We do a lot of, we've been doing some webinars on it. You'll find copies of those over in the HR University as well. I love questions. Email me your HR question. You can submit your question on the bestpractices.work website or the BrendaTheHRLady.com work website by clicking on the podcast link from the menu, and down towards the bottom of the podcast page, you'll find a submission form for you to go ahead and post your question, which I may read and answer on an upcoming episode. So a question that came across me recently was, and I really loved it, so I wanted to bring it to you guys. How can I maximize productivity in a remote team? Everybody's feeling this. Now, there's something to keep in mind, that a lot of companies, when they are attempting to maximize productivity, they wind up micromanaging by default. And it's not meant to happen that way, but it kind of tends to turn out that way. And when when we first went to a remote workforce, a lot of people were very nervous about, oh my gosh, are people going to be screwing around? Are they going to actually be working? And, it was a very creepy feeling for a lot of leaders. I mean, let's face it, it really was. There was, the question is, can I trust my people? And when if I'm literally playing with a thing of slime right now, and it just, every time I think about this conversation, I grab this thing, because this little ball of Nickelodeon slime, because it makes me think about exactly this. You put that slime in your hands, make a perfect ball, right? Because think of that as your workforce, right? Your perfect environment. That's what you're constantly working on. And then you squeeze it, and then it just starts oozing out in between your fingers. That's what happens with micromanaging. And that's what happens when you put a lot of controls in place. It gets to the point where you can't keep control of everything that you're trying to keep control of. It's just simply how it works. And things start slipping through your fingers, and these are the important things, not just the work. We're talking about employee engagement. We're talking about trust in the workplace. We're talking about people who want to even just stay with your organization. Your employees start leaving, and then we haven't even scratched the surface on all the challenges that come with COVID to begin with. So to maximize productivity in a remote team, the number one thing that you absolutely need to focus in on is trust. And if you haven't made trust part of your regiment, you haven't made it a priority in your organization. There's a really great Chinese proverb that can describe what to do with trust in today's environment if you haven't focused in on it. And that proverb is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is to plant one right now. You can start working on trust at any time. I wouldn't put it off, because trust is key, and it's critical, and it's important. And if you have people who you cannot trust, or you feel like you cannot trust, you need to work to help build that up. And it could be mutual. It could be one-sided. It could be on either your side of the fence or their side of the fence. But the more you set your expectations, and the more you hold people to them, and the more you just trust but verify, not micromanage, trust but verify that the work is getting done, you build that trusting relationship, your productivity is going to go up, because this is an unprecedented time, and you just have to invest in building trust. If it's not something that you know what to do or how to go about doing it, there's actually a really good book out. It was written by Stephen Covey. It's called The Speed of Trust. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And I highly recommend that you dip into that. And you know what? Take it small chunks at a time. You don't have to read it in one sit down cover to cover. But really what goes into building trust is knowing what expectations you want set, being very clear about them, communicating them, be available to your employees to help them through their challenges, give them positive feedback, give them developmental feedback. I don't believe in giving constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is just a way of draining the emotional bank account. It really does. But if you give somebody developmental feedback and help them figure out how to overcome their obstacles, just working on those things, that's going to launch your trust factor up quite a bit. Okay. So that's an awesome, awesome question. And if you want to learn more about HR stuff, November 9th through the 13th, I am hosting a free HR summit. This is the last time I'm going to do this for free. We've got awesome speakers, 4 awesome speakers. We've got Suzanne Lucas, the evil HR lady, and my co-host on the Real HR Show, which, by the way, the last one that we did is over on YouTube. You can Google it and find the Real HR Show. We did on pushing back to the CEO, and basically how do you jump in front of that freight train and help protect them as well. She's going to be talking. Tay Nelms, who's a former HR for the Bellagio and Treasure Island hotels in Las Vegas. She's coming on. Steve Watson, awesome dude. He is the CFO and founder of Trendbusters, and his favorite all-time thing, literally loves to figure out how he can help companies save money on their benefits. So he's going to be talking about the 5 hacks for 2021. And yours truly, I'm going to be coming in and on Wednesday and on Friday of that week. It's 1 hour every day that we're going to be doing this for the whole week. And I'm going to be talking to you about HR leadership and how you can really focus and impact your HR career. So if you want to connect with people and have real conversations in real time with real people, I'm going to invite you to come join us over at the Next Gen Women in HR community. It's a lot of new and exciting changes and things that are coming down in the next several months as far as, what kind of cool shifts in order to match the demands of 2020 and going into 2021. This is a really awesome group of men, women and men, and we're growing strong and growing fast. I mean, like hugely fast. I can speak for the group and share that we would love to have you join us. Come on in, get involved in the conversation, learn a little, share a little, connect with people. It's a good group of people. And if you are an HR pro or an aspiring HR pro listening to this episode, I believe that there's 6 aspects of HR leadership that you need in order to be successful, and you have to master them. Even if you aren't an HR manager and are looking to get better at being a people leader, these 6 aspects are going to help you, and they are all available in my free HR leadership course at BrendaTheHRLady.com. When you sign up for the course, you'll get my best practices and updates delivered directly to your inbox on a regular basis. And you know what? If you guys are listening to this episode, please hop out over to whatever platform you're at. If you're listening to Apple Podcasts or if you're listening to Stitcher, do me a favor. Would you please leave your 5-star review? I would really greatly appreciate it. And if you know somebody in HR, please feel free to go ahead and share this episode with them. Now, if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me in a couple of different places. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Brenda the HR Lady. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Brenda Neckvaddle, and my last name is spelled N-E-C-K, like the thing you want to choke, V as in Victor, A-T-A-L. I also co-host another show called The Real HR Show, I mentioned just a little while ago, with the evil HR lady herself, Suzanne Lucas. You can find us over on YouTube over there. And lastly, you can jump on the website at BrendaTheHRLady.com, where you can read the news updates I called out earlier in today's episode by clicking on the podcast link, and then you can get access to this week's articles. So folks, thank you so much again for joining me for another week. I greatly appreciate it. Can't believe we're in Q4 already, and the year is starting to wind down. So if anything we can do to help you guys out, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll talk to you guys later.